My daughter came back home on a Tuesday, and I welcomed her with open arms. 3 months later, when she raised her voice at me for the last time and knocked my coffee mug off the counter, looked me dead in the eye while she did it, I didn't say a single word. But the following Sunday morning, when she came downstairs expecting her usual breakfast and her usual apology from me, she stopped dead in the hallway when she heard who was sitting at my kitchen table, and the smile on her face disappeared like smoke in the wind. But you need to understand how we got there. You need to know the whole story. So let me introduce myself properly. My name is Dorothy Calloway. I am 64 years old, a retired school librarian, and I live in a pale yellow house with white shutters on Magnolia Street in Macon, Georgia. I have hydrangeas in the front yard that my late husband Earl planted the year we moved in, back in 1987. I have a vegetable garden in the back that I tend every morning before the Georgia heat gets mean. I have a fat orange cat named Biscuit who sleeps on the porch like he owns the property. And until recently, I had something else too. A daughter living in my spare bedroom who had convinced me that I was the only person in the world who could save her. Her name is Renata. She is 37 years old. And for the first 35 years of her life, she was the light of mine. Earl and I had her late. I was 27, he was 30, and we had tried for years before she came along. When she was born, Earl stood in that hospital room in Augusta, with tears running down his face, holding this tiny, red-faced girl like she was made of blown glass. "She's perfect, Dot," he whispered. "She is absolutely perfect," and she was. She really was. She grew up quick and bright and curious. She was the kind of child who asked questions that made her teachers pause. Why does the sun look orange at sunset? If the earth is round, why don't people fall off the bottom? Her third-grade teacher called me once just to tell me, "Mrs. Calloway, your daughter is something special. You hold on to that." I held on to it every day. Earl died when Renata was 22, her senior year of college. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. It happened so fast, we barely had time to catch our breath between one piece of bad news and the next. At his funeral, Renata stood next to me with her arm around my shoulders, holding me up, whispering, "I've got you, Mama. I've got you, Mama." And she did for a while. She really did. She graduated, got a marketing job in Atlanta, built herself a life up there. She called every Sunday. She came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and sometimes just because. Pulling into my driveway with a bottle of wine and a bag of peaches from a farm stand on the highway. She had a boyfriend named Marcus for 3 years. Then she had a fiancé named Marcus for 1 year. Then she had a ring she took off and put in a drawer and never talked about again. I didn't ask too many questions. That was my first mistake, I suppose. A mother's instinct is to smooth things over, to not press on a bruise. I let her be quiet about Marcus. I let her be quiet about the job change, and then the second job change, and then the period of freelancing that she described as freeing, but that seemed, from the outside, a lot more like drowning slowly in very calm water. I first noticed the money trouble about 2 years after Earl passed. Small things. She stopped offering to split the check when we went to lunch. She started asking if I needed anything from the store, and then handing me a receipt afterward. $112. Did I need this much shampoo? I wondered. But I paid it. Love doesn't keep a ledger, that's what I always believed. Then the calls changed. They stopped being about her week, her thoughts, funny things that happened. They started being about problems. Her landlord raised the rent. Her car needed a new alternator. Her insurance dropped her. Each call ended the same way, with a pause just long enough for me to offer, and I always offered. "How much do you need, honey?" And I always sent it. I am not a wealthy woman. I have my pension from 30 years in the Bibb County school system. I have the house paid off. I have Earl's small life insurance policy that I treated like sacred ground, money I was not supposed to touch except for true emergencies. I started touching it about a year before Renata came home. She asked to move back in on a Sunday afternoon in October. She called crying, really crying. Not the kind of crying that asks for sympathy, but the kind that comes from a person who has genuinely run out of road. I lost the apartment, Mama. I don't know what happened. Everything just fell apart at once. Can I come home, just for a little while? Just until I get back on my feet? What was I supposed to say? She was my child. She was Earl's daughter. I said yes before she finished asking. She arrived on a Tuesday with 3 suitcases and her car loaded to the roof, which told me the little while might be longer than she'd let on. But I set up the spare bedroom with fresh linens and a new lamb from Target, and I made her favorite, chicken and dumplings, and we sat at the kitchen table and talked until almost midnight. It felt good, if I am being honest. The house had been quiet for a long time. Having her there felt like warmth coming back into a room that had gone cold. For the first few weeks, things were fine. She was looking for work, or said she was. She spent a lot of time on her laptop at the kitchen table. She kept odd hours, staying up past 2 in the morning, sleeping until 10 or 11. I adjusted my own routine without thinking about it, tiptoeing around the kitchen in the early morning so I wouldn't wake her, eating dinner later to wait for her, rearranging my whole quiet life around the schedule of someone who hadn't asked me to, but who I loved too much to inconvenience. The first time she spoke to me in a way that made my stomach drop, I told myself it was stress. I had set her laundry on top of the dryer instead of folding it and putting it away in her room, which I had apparently been doing without realizing it had become an expectation. She came into the kitchen where I was reading and said in a flat voice I didn't recognize, "I asked you not to touch my things. Just leave them. I can't find anything when you move everything around." I apologized. I actually apologized for doing her laundry. Looking back now, I understand what that apology meant to her. It told her the dynamic had been established. It told her I would bend. The requests grew. Could I not watch television after 9 because the sound carried through the wall? Could I stop cooking with onions because the smell bothered her? Could I move my car to the street so she could use the driveway? Small things, each one individually reasonable sounding, but piled together forming a different shape entirely, the shape of a woman being slowly edged out of her own home. I started to feel like a guest. I would stand in the kitchen and think, do I have permission to be here right now? Is this going to disturb something? I caught myself walking on the balls of my feet, keeping my movements small, managing my own voice. And the money continued. She had not found work, or the work she found wasn't paying yet, or there were expenses she hadn't anticipated. "Mama, I hate to ask, but could you cover the car insurance this month? Mama, I need to get my laptop fixed. I can't look for work without it. Mama, I'm so sorry. I know this isn't fair to you." I always said it's fine, because she always said she was sorry. And a person who says they're sorry, you tell yourself, is a person who knows better. A person who knows better will eventually do better. The evening that changed something inside me, the evening where the sorry started to ring hollow, was a Wednesday in late spring. I had spent the afternoon making a pound cake for Mrs. Velma Jenkins, my neighbor 2 doors down who had just come home from a hip replacement surgery. I baked the cake and walked it over and sat with Velma for an hour while she talked about the hospital and the food there, and how much she missed her husband who had been gone for 11 years now. Ordinary kindness. The kind of thing I had done my whole life without thinking. When I got back home, Renata was standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed. "You used the last of the butter," she said. "I was going to make pasta tonight." I looked at her. I looked at the grocery money I had handed her 3 days ago. Money I gave her specifically to restock the kitchen. I looked at her standing in my kitchen, in my house, telling me I had done something wrong by baking a cake for a sick neighbor with my own butter. And I opened my mouth and said, "I'll pick some up tomorrow." That night I sat in my bedroom and I thought about Velma, who at 71 lived alone with her cat and her memories and her gentle widowed peace. I thought about what Earl would say if he could see his kitchen right now, the tension in it, the careful silence. I prayed, the way I have prayed every night for 40 years, and I asked God to show me what I was supposed to do with this love I had for my daughter that was beginning to hurt me. The answer came 6 weeks later, on a Saturday night. I had asked Renata 3 times over the course of 2 weeks to please not leave her dishes in the sink overnight. I had a mouse problem the previous fall, and I had worked hard to solve it, and the dirty dishes worried me. 3 times I asked, gently, the way you ask someone you're trying not to push. 3 times she said, "Sure, of course, Mama, I'm sorry." And 3 times the dishes sat in the sink until morning. On that Saturday, I came downstairs early before 6 and found a skillet full of hardened egg, a plate with dry tomato sauce, and 2 glasses with orange juice residue sitting in the sink, exactly as I had asked her not to leave them. I washed them without saying anything. I made my coffee. I fed Biscuit. And when Renata came downstairs around 10 and poured herself a cup of coffee from my pot, I said, gently, "I really need you to try to remember about the dishes, honey." She set her cup down. She turned around, and the look on her face was not the look of a woman who was sorry or embarrassed or even mildly inconvenienced. It was the look of someone who had been interrupted. "Why are you always on me about something?" she said. I kept my voice even. I told her it wasn't always on her about something. I had one simple request. She laughed. Not a real laugh. The other kind. "You know what your problem is, Mama? You can't let anything go." Dad always said that. You hold on to every little thing. I felt the air go out of the room. She had invoked Earl against me. She had taken something sacred and turned it into ammunition, and in that moment I felt something shift inside me. Not break. Something closer to going still. She wasn't finished. "Do you know how hard it is to come back here? To have to be here, in this house, where everything is exactly the same as it was 20 years ago? You never changed a single thing. You live in a museum. You act like this whole house is a shrine to him, and I'm just supposed to tiptoe around it." I stared at her. She picked up her coffee and walked out of the kitchen, and I stood there next to the sink where I had just washed her dishes, and I looked out the window at the hydrangeas Earl planted, and I thought, this has gone on long enough. But I didn't act, not yet, because I am a woman who thinks before she moves. I am a librarian. I understand that you do not respond to a situation until you understand it fully. What I understood over the following 2 weeks was this. My daughter was not having a hard time. My daughter was making a choice. There is a difference between someone who is struggling and someone who has decided that your house and your money and your emotional labor are resources available for her use. Struggle makes a person humble. What Renata had was not humility. It was entitlement that had grown so comfortable it had stopped noticing itself. I called my friend Gloria on a Thursday night. Gloria is 68, sharp as a tack, a retired family court attorney who worked in Macon for 30 years and has seen, in her professional capacity, just about every variety of human behavior there is. She and I have been friends since our children were in elementary school together. I called her and I told her everything, starting from October and ending with the dishes and the comment about Earl. When I finished, Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dorothy, you know what I think you should do?" I told her I thought I did, but I needed someone else to say it, and she said it. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in the bedroom that Earl and I shared for 26 years, looking at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Renata's television through the wall. It was past midnight. She was watching something with a loud laugh track, and I thought about the woman I had been before October. Peaceful, purposeful, moving through my days with a quiet satisfaction, my garden and my cat and my church and my friends and the memory of a good man who had loved me well. I wanted that woman back. I made 2 phone calls the next morning after Renata left to run an errand she mentioned vaguely before slipping out the door. The first was to Gloria. "I need you to come to Sunday breakfast," I said. "Bring that kind of presence you bring to a courtroom." She understood immediately. She said, "I'll be there at 9 sharp, and I'll wear the navy suit." The second call was to my accountant, a careful and decent man named Mr. Theodore Webb, who had handled Earl's estate and had been quietly managing my finances for years. "Mr. Webb," I said, "I need to make some changes and I need them documented properly. I need a letter." I explained what kind. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "I've been wondering when you'd call, Mrs. Calloway. I'll have it ready by Saturday. I spent Saturday cleaning the house top to bottom. I polished the dining table. I got out the good tablecloth, the white damask one I use at Christmas. I cut fresh hydrangeas from the yard and put them in the crystal vase Earl's mother gave us as a wedding gift. I baked 2 dozen biscuits, the real kind with cold butter worked into the flour until it looks like coarse sand, the way my own mother taught me, and I made a fresh pot of Earl's favorite coffee blend, the dark roast from a little shop on Cherry Street that he used to drive across town for on Saturday mornings." Renata came home that evening and commented that the house smelled nice. She did not ask why I was baking at 7 o'clock on a Saturday. She heated up leftovers and went to her room, and I sat in my chair in the living room and I held the sealed envelope Mr. Webb had couriered over that afternoon, and I felt, for the first time in many months, like myself again. Sunday morning, I was up before 5. I made a full breakfast. Eggs scrambled soft, bacon, sliced tomatoes from my garden, the biscuits warmed in the oven, peach jam I put up myself last August. I set the table in the dining room with the good china, the set with the little blue border that Earl and I picked out together at a shop in Savannah the year we got married. I put out 3 places, not 4, 3. Gloria arrived at 8:55 in the navy suit just as she promised, looking like a woman who had spent decades deciding things. She came in through the kitchen door the way old friends do, and she took one look at my face and hugged me without saying anything. Then she looked at the table and said, "Beautiful." She sat down in the chair to my right. We heard Renata's alarm go off at 9. We heard the shower. We heard her footsteps on the stairs, that familiar unhurried descent of someone who expects the morning to wait for her. She appeared in the dining room doorway in her robe, her hair damp, holding her phone. She stopped. She looked at the table. She looked at me, sitting straight at the head of it in my good dress, the emerald green one I wear to church on Easter. She looked at Gloria in the navy suit, and I watched her face go through several expressions very quickly before it settled on the one that had become most familiar to me over the past months. The expression that was almost a challenge. "What's all this?" "Good morning," Gloria said pleasantly, the way she used to greet nervous witnesses before she cross-examined them. Renata looked at me. "Mama, what's going on?" "Sit down, honey," I said. "Breakfast is ready." She sat down across from me at the far end of the table because that was the only chair set. I noticed her register this. 3 chairs. She wasn't included in the planning of this morning. Something had happened without her, and she didn't know what it was yet. I poured coffee. I served the eggs. I passed the biscuits. Gloria and I talked lightly about her grandchildren and about the hydrangeas and about a mutual friend from church who had just gotten a fabulous piece of news about her health. Normal conversation. Sunday morning conversation. The kind that fills a room with warmth that has nothing to do with the person who refuses to be part of it. Renata ate. She couldn't not eat. The food was there and it smelled good, and she is her father's daughter in that way. She has never in her life been able to resist a hot biscuit, but she was watchful. She knew something was coming. She's smart. I raised her to be smart, and that has not left her. "Gloria," she finally said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I invited her," I said. Renata looked at me. "How come?" "Because I wanted a witness," I said. The word witness did something to Renata's face. It stripped the casual right off of it. I reached beside my chair and picked up the envelope from Mr. Webb. I set it on the table in front of me. I smoothed it with my palm. "I love you," I said. I want to say that first because everything I'm about to say comes from that place. I love you the way I loved you the day you were born. When your father held you in that hospital in Augusta and called you perfect. I have loved you through every single thing. I will love you until I die. Renata was very still. But I have made a decision, I continued, and my voice was steady. Because I had practiced this, because I understood that my voice needed to be steady for this to mean something. I have made a decision about this house and about my life and about what I am willing to continue. I pushed the envelope toward her. She didn't pick it up. Inside that envelope is a letter from my accountant. It outlines a repayment plan for the money I've given you over the past 2.5 years. I went back through my records. The total comes to just over $14,000. Mr. Webb has structured it at 0 interest because I'm your mother, not a bank. But there are dates and there are amounts, and it is a legal document that you will need to sign. She opened her mouth. I'm not finished, I said quietly. Gloria, to my right, did not move. She was simply present, the way a courthouse wall is present. Solid. Witnessing everything. Inside that envelope there is also a second letter. This one from me. It says that I am asking you, with love and with firmness, to find your own housing within 30 days. I have given you a list of resources, affordable apartments in Macon, contacts for job placement services, the name of a financial counselor at the community center on Riverside who is very good. I will help you. I will help you in reasonable ways, planned ways, ways we agree on together. But I will no longer fund a life for you while you treat mine as an inconvenience. The word inconvenience landed hard. I saw it land. Renata's eyes filled. Mama. I remember the first morning she walked into the kitchen. Before everything shifted. Before I became afraid of her moods, I remember thinking, my girl is home. Whatever is wrong, we'll figure it out together. I had meant it. I had given everything I had to that belief. You told me last month that I live in a museum, I said. That this house hasn't changed. You're right. It hasn't. Because this house hasn't changed. You're right. It hasn't. Because this house is mine, Renata. It was mine and your father's, and now it is mine alone, and I keep it the way I keep it because I choose to, not because I'm frozen, not because I can't move on, because these walls hold something precious to me, and I am not obligated to change them to make someone else comfortable. Someone who is a guest here, someone who I invited in because I thought she needed help, and who took that invitation and slowly turned it into something that made me afraid to walk through my own kitchen. Renata was crying now, not the strategic crying I'd grown used to over these months, the kind that arrived precisely when she needed something. This was different. This was the crying of someone caught, someone who had been seen clearly and couldn't argue with the clarity. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, she said. I believe you, I replied. I don't think you meant any of it consciously. I think you were in pain, and I think you came home and found someone who would absorb that pain without complaint. And I think you let yourself take and take without ever stopping to ask what it was costing me. That is not a crime. But it is something you need to understand about yourself, and you cannot understand it as long as I keep making it easy for you. Gloria spoke then, for the first time since the conversation had become serious. She kept her voice gentle, but there was something in it. Something that came from 30 years of asking people to look at hard truths in uncomfortable rooms. Renata, she said, your mama has not done a single thing these past months that wasn't out of love. But love doesn't mean she has to disappear. You lost your way, that's human. But your mama found hers again, and she's trying to show you back to yours. That envelope isn't a punishment, it's a map. Renata looked at Gloria, then she looked at me. She looked at the table, the good china, the crystal vase with the hydrangeas from Earl's garden. She picked up the envelope with both hands, carefully, the way you hold something that you finally understand the weight of. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, quietly, I didn't know it was this bad, Mama. I didn't know I was doing this to you. And I believed her. That is the complicated truth of it. I believed her. Because she is not a bad person, my daughter. She is a person who got lost the way people do, and who leaned too hard on the one person who had never let her fall, until the leaning became something else entirely. That afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table and read both letters fully, twice. She asked questions, reasonable questions about the repayment plan and the timeline. She was not the woman who had told me I live in a museum. She was someone smaller and more honest and more like herself. Before Gloria left, she stopped in the doorway and squeezed my hand. "Earl would be proud of you today, Dot," she said. "I know he would." I stood on the porch for a long time after Gloria's car pulled away, watching the afternoon light settle into the hydrangeas. Biscuit wound around my ankles. The air smelled like Georgia in summer, cut grass and heat, and something almost sweet underneath it. I thought about Earl. I thought about the last Sunday morning before he got too sick to come downstairs, when we sat at this same kitchen table with bad coffee and the newspaper spread between us, and not a single word needed because we had built something so solid that silence in it felt like rest. I thought about what it means to love someone fiercely and still know where you end and they begin. Renata found an apartment in 31 days. It was one day late, but I did not mention this. I helped her move. I drove 3 boxes in my car, and I helped her put up curtains, and I stopped her kitchen with the basics, and I made her laugh at least twice that day. Real laughter. The kind that sounds like it comes from somewhere good. She is working now, a real job this time, steady hours, health insurance, a manager who she says is demanding but fair. She is seeing a counselor, which she started on her own without my suggesting it, and I consider this the single most hopeful sign of all. She comes for Sunday lunch twice a month. She calls first to ask if that weekend is good for me. She brings something every time. Flowers once, a candle another time. Last month a jar of honey from a farmer's market near her apartment. Small things. Considered things. The gestures of a person learning to give as well as take. We do not talk much about those months. There is a tenderness around that time that neither of us pushes. But once, a few weeks after she moved out, she called me on a Thursday evening just to talk. The old kind of call. The kind about nothing and everything. About a funny thing that happened on the bus, and a book she had started, and a memory of Earl that had come to her while she was washing dishes. And when we hung up an hour later, I sat in my chair in the living room and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Ease. Not because things were fixed, necessarily. Some things between a mother and daughter get bent and never go back to exactly straight, but because we were honest now. Because there was space now. And because the love between us had been tested and had held. It had held at the edges, even when the middle was failing. That matters. That means something. I am 64 years old. I have hydrangeas in the front yard and a cat on the porch and a life that is, on most days, exactly what I want it to be. I have learned something about love that I wish someone had told me earlier. That to love someone had told me earlier. That to love someone with your whole heart does not mean to love them at the cost of yourself. That a soft no given in time is kinder than a silent yes that slowly turns you hollow. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a person is to stop catching them before they hit the ground, and instead kneel beside them in the dirt and say, "All right. Now let's get up." If you are sitting somewhere right now listening to this story and something in it sounds familiar, I want you to know something. You are not wrong for feeling it. You are not ungrateful. You are not unloving. You are simply a person who has finally decided that your peace matters too. And that, I promise you, is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a better one. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from today. And if this story meant something to you, please leave a like so I can keep bringing more stories like this one. There are other stories waiting on your screen right now. Click on one. I think you'll find something worth your time. And please subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.